Hi, I'm Isaki Voelker, creator and author of It's Not What It Seems, and this channel let me tell you a tale. Redoing my intro a little bit more informal right now because I just wasn't getting the words right. Today's story does not fall under the same category of It's Not What It Seems. Those stories are always inspired by something, that is not super severe and actually happening to us. Could they happen? Yeah, maybe you could, or they're really far out there too. But today's story is inspired by true current events happening in the world right now that really need a lot of attention brought to it as much as possible. My talent is writing, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using my voice in the way that I know I am able to. Today's story I debated about with myself a little bit if I should include sound effects or not. I've decided to use little to no sound effects because I do not want today's story to entertain you. I want it to make you feel something. And if it made you feel anything, I really hope that you'll share this story with other people. Just because something isn't directly at our own doorsteps, that's not an excuse to be unempathetic, to look away, to not acknowledge that there is something very evil, very sinister happening in the world right now. And there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that's really bad. But this story was the hardest thing I've ever had to write. I had to stop multiple times because I just broke down and I started crying. I started crying a lot. It was too heavy. It was too much. But I had to write this. So I hope you will open your ears, open your hearts, and give this tale a lesson. Or a listen. Yeah. I saw fire. Before I could scream, I was falling. The hairs along my spine stood on edge, all of my senses heightened in milliseconds. My brown eyes flung open to see a splotchy mix of darkness and bright light. Was it day? Was it night? I screamed in pure terror as I fell backwards, my eyes looking up at the cracked pieces of ceiling threatening to hit me as I too fell. My body landed hard, back first, with my limbs and head landing a split second later. The bed I was resting in sheltered my fall, but I bounced off of it onto what used to be my second-story floor. Ceiling debris fell around me. A large piece came smashing down hard onto my right leg. I winced in pain, but I was able to snap into a fetal position successfully. Dirt and dust fell around me. I waited a moment until I was sure the largest pieces had finished falling. I poked my head out from under my arms and spun to look behind me at my damaged bed in bright daylight. My wife wasn't as fortunate as I when she landed. She was still pushing debris off of herself and calling out in Arabic for me. I rushed to her side in seconds, adrenaline allowing me to ignore the pain in my leg. I flung large pieces of sheetrock from off of her and pulled her to her feet. I looked into her large, dark eyes that were filling up in tears. Bright red blood trickled down from a cut from her eyebrow, but she looked overall alive with no broken bones. I looked up at the sky as I heard missiles flying overhead. I jumped as one struck a building a block away. The rubble of our home quaked beneath our feet. It was unsteady. We had to act quickly. My wife was 2 steps ahead of me as we hastily stepped over wires, walls, and furniture to the sound of one of our daughters crying and screaming for us. My heart pumped loudly in my ears as I fought hard to push back tears until I know both of my babies were safe and sound. The smallest of hands stuck out from a dark triangular opening. It was covered in dust and dirt and waved wildly for attention. My wife grabbed hold of our daughter's hand and kissed it, holding it close to her chest. She spoke words of comfort and love before she stood. Together we pushed and pulled at a large broken slabs of wall. In less than a minute, we freed our 4-year-old daughter, and my wife hugged her and smothered her in kisses, both of them crying as the hollow echoes of war and death surrounded us. However, it was not time to celebrate. We hadn't heard any sounds from our 1-year-old. I followed the short trail of broken wood from our daughter's bed that sloped downward in the damage. Our eldest must have fallen off of their bed before it fell down, but our youngest. Slow movement out of the corner of my eye caught me to turn my head, and I caught my breath. I heard the sounds of my wife approaching to help when I quickly turned to her and yelled for her to turn back. Her eyes widened, and I knew that she knew. She screamed no and ran down to the broken pieces of our home before I caught her in my arms. Looking past me, she saw the mattress that led her eyes to a pool of blood unapologetically widening, dripping down into the dark abyss of our broken home. I felt my wife's body slump as all the strength left her legs. I could do nothing to hold her up, so I stooped down with her. I listened to her gasping for breath in between sobs. My heart shattered as I listened to her mourn. I beckoned for our eldest to come over and hugged them tightly in my arms. My tears made my already hazy, dirt-filled vision even worse, but I could do nothing to stop them. A long moment passed before I broke away from them. "I will bring her to you," I managed to choke out. I held my wife's shoulder so she could look at me. I would not leave her there. I motioned for my eldest daughter, now my only daughter, to stay by her mother's side and to look away from where her sister's body was. "Hold on to each other," I said as I turned around. I stepped gingerly toward the crushed mattress over metal and stone. I almost stepped on a doll that my daughters often played with. I picked it up and set it off to the side. Stepping on it felt wrong to me. I looked up through the dust starting to settle to see the sun not too high over the horizon. My daughter's body was partially still on the mattress, but was mostly crushed under debris. I took a slow, deep breath and pushed my sadness down as far as I could. I flung all my strength and anger into my arms as I pushed up the large walls that collapsed onto my youngest. I turned my whole body so that I was now holding them up with my back. I freed up my hands, but it was just too hard for me to hold the walls and grab my daughter's body at the same time. My wife screamed so intensely that I jumped and almost dropped what I was holding up when she saw the body of our baby. She scrambled on hands and knees across everything broken and quickly but lovingly lifted up and embraced our little girl. I dropped the walls the moment I could and no longer held back my sorrow. My wife's screams turned guttural as she inspected the lifeless body she held, arms shaking. The little girl that once smiled with white teeth now had blood dripping from her lips. Her bright, smiling eyes were gone. One hung out of its socket where the skull was crushed. I didn't know whether to cover her face or to try and fix it as best as I could. She was mangled and broken. My wife clutched her desperately to her chest, her heart crippled into unimaginable heavy sadness. I stepped around my wife to stop our 4-year-old from getting too close. I hugged her tightly. She didn't need to see her sister any longer than what she already did. I felt her body shake and the tears soak through my shirt. Hot tears of my own streaked down my face as I wailed. The war that raged for over a millennia had finally made its way into our lives. My youngest was now a number to be added to the statistics. My heart grieved in a way I never wanted to know. How could such blatant hatred and blindness exist? I don't think I will ever have the answer to that. As the sun rose slowly to meet this blood-filled day, all of our cries began to subdue. Our pain would be carried forever, but now, after the initial shock passed, we knew we had to move. We had to head somewhere south, not yet met with death. I bent down on one knee and held my daughter at arm's length. I looked her over properly and asked if she was hurting anywhere. Her arm. I saw her hold it, and I thought it might be broken in places. She was probably still in shock after seeing her sister's body and falling a whole floor. Now we face a new and uncertain future. I looked over at my wife, who was still sitting down, rocking our youngest in her arms. "I'll handle her in a moment." I turned to look down around me in the space that was once our daughter's bedroom. My eyes searched through the chaotic debris. I stepped away from my daughter to flip things over until I found 2 mismatched shoes and a t-shirt. I walked back over to my daughter and ripped the shirt with my teeth, spitting out some dirt. I fastened it into a temporary sling for her arm and slid it over her shoulder, helping her to get her arm into the right spot. Then I knelt down and slipped her shoes onto her feet, one at a time. "You'll have to stay in your pajamas for now," I said. I turned away again and quickly moved back to where my wife and I's bed was. I yanked hard at a sheet until it tore free and took it back over to my family. "We need to—" I motioned with the sheet. My wife nodded back quietly as tears fell down her cheeks. Her eyes filled with heavy mourning that turned them red. I carefully helped her down the rubble to the street as she held our baby. Then I guided our eldest daughter down. We walked down our street a short distance to a spot that was clear. With love, I spread out the dirty white sheet down on the ground. I looked up and around me for a moment, surveying what was once our neighborhood. Many, many others were walking across piles of homes, some shouting, some crying. I heard the grief, the deafening wails of men, women, children, the whimper of dogs. A cat raced down the street with its tail afire. I felt my wife carefully lay our daughter's body down on the ground and begin to fold the sheet over her. But I could not move anything but my eyes. My body was in shock, my mind in disbelief. The smell of smoke, both chemical and natural, filled my nostrils so that it stung. I looked onto the distance. I looked on in the distance. There were people walking that looked like they should be corpses. How was someone able to move if their skin was falling off? How were their screams and cries so loud? Screams of pain, cries for help, but who could help them? Was this what the world wanted? Why? I heard mothers weeping and crying to Allah, I heard mothers weeping and crying to Allah for the loss of their children. My wife wasn't the only one who carried the dead in her arms. Men and women of all ages were digging through the rubble with their hands, desperately trying to free those trapped under the destruction. I watched as a child approached a stranger for help. He was looking for his parents. I wanted to help everyone, but I couldn't even help my own family. I looked down in numb shock and finally willed myself to move. I assisted my wife in wrapping up our daughter. Why would anyone truly want to kill us so badly that they didn't care that they were killing children? Killing people who couldn't control how or where they were born. People who never held a gun or wished for violence on anyone. My thoughts burdened me as I stroked my daughter's curly dark hair for the last time. I couldn't bear to see her deformed little body. My eyes welled up with tears so that her image became blurry. I wanted to rewind time to just a couple of hours ago so that I could hold her in my arms. I wanted to see my daughters laughing with my wife despite the food and water shortages we were going through. I wanted to be able to continue hoping that the war would never reach our doorstep, that a long-lasting peaceful agreement would be made before any more death. Instead, I lifted up my wrapped daughter's body and placed it lovingly back in my wife's arms, who sat on a broken cinder block. My daughter joined her and clung to her shirt sleeve. "I'm going to look for things," I said to my beloved. She nodded and I kissed her forehead. Then I bent down and kissed the top of my eldest daughter's head. "Stay here," I told her in a gentle but hollow voice. My legs moved on autopilot back to the pile that was once our home, filled with laughter and warmth. My family was my greatest blessing. I did everything possible to provide for them, and now all I worked so hard for was sitting at my feet. Despair. Still, I moved quickly and carefully across the piles of our lives. I found a backpack, a couple of now dirty hijabs, socks pulled from a broken dresser drawer. I uncovered a pair of shoes for myself and put them on so that I could move easier. I went back and grabbed my daughter's doll, a knife from the kitchen area. I was hoping to find some matches or lighters, but they were too small to be found. I filled 2 bags of whatever I thought would be worth carrying with us before the sun was above our heads. I looked over to my wife and child and held up the bags I filled. I wanted to give a half smile, but my mouth just wouldn't move. It was frozen in sadness. I stepped up and down over the edge of the remains of the home that we leave behind and made my way back to them. It was a long journey ahead of us. We needed to get somewhere safe, away from more oncoming attacks. And we needed to bury our child. The only thing I hoped for, as I almost lost my balance and fell on broken glass, was that wherever we found a resting spot for her, I hoped someone had a shovel. I did not want her in a shallow grave to be raided by beast or man. I stepped down onto solid ground and made my way back toward my family. Looking over to my left, I saw the boy who was asking for help earlier, guiding a group of men to his own pile of rubble. I saw movement from under rocks and hoped whoever it was would be rescued quickly. As soon as we get somewhere safe tonight, I'm going to hold my family and we will mourn properly together. We won't be torn apart anymore, I promised myself silently. I walked quickly with one backpack on my back and one in my hand. I found shoes for my wife and held them in my other hand. We were going to be doing a lot of walking. From behind me, I heard a missile zoom flying past too low to the ground. My eyes saw the trajectory, and before I could open my mouth to scream warning, I was flung backwards through the air farther away from my family. I felt my body slam hard against something solid. My neck snapped back, then forward, as I landed hard to the ground. I coughed, but heard nothing, for the high-pitched ringing in my ears. My eyes burned horribly. I tried to raise my arm to my face, but couldn't. I couldn't move at all. I felt nothing from my neck down. I was paralyzed. I moved my eyes to look around. The boy from earlier was no longer looking for his family. All the waving from under the rubble silenced. I brought my attention to where my family was seated, and I saw their bodies. My wife was on her chest in the dirt, her eyes open and glazed over, facing my direction. Her back was torn to shreds, bleeding, and the remains of her clothing burned. Her legs were completely blown off. I screamed. Can't see letters. I screamed, feeling both horrified and helpless. I could barely hear myself over the ringing, but I knew I could not profess any louder. Our deceased daughter, that she was holding now, lay unwrapped with fire burning up her clothes and charring her skin. I moved my eyes over to the third body, my other precious daughter. The bottom half of her torso and legs were completely gone. A massive pool of blood was quickly forming, stretching out toward my wife's body. I pleadingly stared into my daughter's eyes, begging for this to not be true. But they did not blink. They did not stir. From my mouth came sounds I never made before until now. I gasped for breath, choking on my sobs. My body retched and tried to throw up bile, but only blood sprayed from my lips. I looked down in the tiniest movement I was allowed and saw my own blood pouring out from my body. I continued to cry heavily, not for the loss of my own body and life, but for the absence of those I loved, for those that did not deserve to know such cruelty, for the tiniest hands I ever got to hold, for the most loving wife I was blessed with. Why? I wanted so badly to reach out and to hold them in my last moments, but I couldn't crawl to them. I couldn't even reach out my hand. "I'm so sorry," I gurgled out. Sorry I couldn't protect him from racism and prejudice.
Sorry that they knew pain and sorrow as I died. Sorry that I wasn't standing right there next to them. Sorry that my children were brought into this world only to be killed without anything. To only live for a short while. Sorry for my wife knowing the death of her child. Sorry for not being stronger, smarter. I'm sorry for... I closed my eyes. Everything was icy cold, and my heart was slowing down. I thought of my family one last time, and I hoped I would see them again in just a moment. This was the hardest story I've ever had to write, and I had to stop multiple times because I just would start crying uncontrollably. I cannot imagine the pain of losing your child. I cannot imagine the pain that so many people are going through right now. Unfortunately, this time it is what it seems.